In the summer of 2024, Keir Starmer stood on the steps of 10 Downing Street, basking in the glow of a historic landslide victory. The Labour Party had secured a commanding majority, promising stability, competence, and an end to the years of political and economic turmoil that had defined the Conservative rule. For millions of Britons, it was a moment of hope. The promise of responsible governance, a fairer economy, and a return to social justice ignited a wave of optimism across the country. But hope, as history often reminds us, is a fragile thing. Fast forward 9 months, and the cracks in Labour's foundation had begun to show. Discontent was spreading like wildfire, and voters who had once placed their faith in Starmer's government were now turning their backs. Labour's support was crumbling at an alarming rate. What had gone so wrong, so quickly? At the heart of the backlash were a series of deeply unpopular policies. Labour's decision to strip pensioners of their winter fuel payments left elderly voters outraged. In rural Britain, farmers reeled from the shock of punishing new death duties. Meanwhile, a tax hike of £40 billion squeezed the already struggling middle class, while record levels of illegal migration made headlines across the nation. The government's inability to curb small boat crossings fueled public frustration, and soon enough, Labour found itself on the defensive. By March 2025, Labour had suffered a net loss of 35 council seats. Their vote share had plummeted by 9.1%, a staggering collapse for a party that had stormed into power with a dominant majority. The Conservatives, despite their own struggles, had clawed back 22 seats, while Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, was surging ahead with a 9% increase in vote share, the largest of any party. Reform's presence in council elections was undeniable. They had finished second in 6 out of 9 contests, proving they were no longer a fringe movement. Labour was bleeding support from every direction, and Starmer knew it. His usual tactics, political spin, distractions, and vague promises, were no longer fooling the public. The numbers didn't lie. Labour was in freefall, and the consequences could be devastating. Part 2. The Reckoning As Starmer scrambled to regain control, the backlash only intensified. Internal dissent within Labour was brewing, as party members began questioning the leadership's decisions. The opposition parties, despite their own divisions, capitalised on Labour's missteps. Reform UK, though embroiled in internal turmoil, continued to gain ground. A very public feud between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe threatened to derail Reform's momentum, but instead, it only solidified Farage's grip on the party. Reform swiftly expelled Lowe, citing allegations of bullying and misconduct, and despite the controversy, their popularity remained intact. Meanwhile, new statistics from NHS England painted a grim picture. The impact of Labour's winter fuel allowance cuts on pensioners had been catastrophic. Over 94,600 more elderly patients had flooded A&E departments compared to the previous year, with over 2.1 million emergency visits recorded between September 2024 and February 2025. For many, it was the final straw. Former UKIP leader Henry Bolton lambasted the government, accusing them of abandoning Britain's most vulnerable citizens. "It feels as though the government hates everybody," Bolton declared in a scathing address. Or at the very least, they don't care about vast swathes of the population. People are struggling to survive, and Labour's policies are only making things worse. No wonder anxiety and stress are at an all-time high. This isn't just about economics anymore, it's about human suffering. Despite his criticisms, Bolton acknowledged Labour's attempt to restructure the NHS. However, he warned that the devil is in the details, and without a concrete plan, further chaos was inevitable. Public sentiment echoed Bolton's words. The latest poll from Find Out now placed Reform UK in first place with 27% of the vote, a shocking surge. Labour had fallen to 24%, while the Conservatives stagnated at 21%. One voter summed up the situation bluntly. No decline in support for reform, despite the Farage-Lowe bust-up. Labour is collapsing. And the Tories? Well, their misery continues. For Keir Starmer, the writing was on the wall. He had promised strong leadership, but his so-called Falklands moment, an attempt to assert his authority, had backfired. Labour's numbers continued to plummet, and their dream of a long-term government was slipping away. 9 months after their triumphant victory, Starmer and his party faced an undeniable truth. Their time at the top could be much shorter than anyone had anticipated. And as history had shown time and again, when trust in a leader is broken, it is nearly impossible to rebuild.